Nobody wants to be rejected. Nobody wants to be pushed away, right? But there are some people who say, okay, I just try it again. This is a mindset that you're building up. And out of this mindset, you can grow yourself a positive attitude. And this positive attitude gives yourself again energy.
Well, kicking this off, Professor. So um, I might going to start with a very silly question. So apologies in advance.
There are no, I'm sorry, but there are no silly questions, right? You know me already. There are no silly questions.
It's one of those questions that I got asked a lot during, when I got onboarded, and that's one of the questions when everyone has to introduce themselves. And so, so yeah. Can you share a fun fact about yourself, Professor, that not many people know?
There are many fun facts I would say about me, but actually, it's not really a fun fact. But I was running my first company for 15 years, and actually, the fun fact here is that the idea for this first company came to my mind while being in the US and on a school trip, on a school exchange, wandering through the national park, through the Arches National Park, with long trousers and sweating like hell, right? Then all of a sudden it made click, right? And I thought, oh, this could be interesting. Let's explore this once I'm back in Austria, right? This was basically this. Not many people know, but this was basically the birth second of the first venture that I did, which was a publishing house, right? And I ran this publishing house for 15 years with an own tech department, on sales department, on editorial team. We made around, 2.5 to 3 million euros revenue at peak times, and had sister companies in Germany and in Istanbul, Turkey. Yeah, so pretty nice and pretty long time actually.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Professor, reflecting on your impressive 20-year entrepreneurial journey from working at, prestigious firms like Deloitte to funding a successful media agency and many more achievements, I'm really curious about how it all began. How would you describe yourself as a teenager, and how do you think those early years shaped your path into entrepreneurship?
First of all, Mr. Niemann, thank you for making me younger. Because when I introduce myself now, I have to say that it's almost 25 years. And this is the thing why I have so many gray hair, right? So I'm happy that you don't have gray hair. I have less hair and many gray hair.
You still look great.
So, yeah, teenager. I would say um, one thing that I was already as a teenager was I was curious, right? I asked a lot of questions, and I was blessed with parents who were really patient with me, right? So they gave me the they gave me the room and also the time to ask the questions, answer the questions, and also nurture there. And I think this curiosity and this open mind, and also and I have to put there a special emphasis on my mother, who really I'm so grateful to her that she always said, for everything that when something bad is happening, there's always something positive happening as well, right? And from there, my optimism is coming, and I think this optimism, which is sometimes for some people around me a little bit too much, I have to be honest, right? Because I can be really optimistic in many ways. I'm the typical half the glass is half full person. Um, but I think this is mega important because the entrepreneurial roller coaster is hitting you quite heavily often, and you have to just stay online and see, okay, where do you want to go and what could be possible way out.
How much do you think it was nurture rather than nature? Just just from your perspective, because it's there are these there are there's quite a large group out there that thinks that, you know, you're not born as an entrepreneur, but you're born with a specific set of skills, or not even that, a specific drive, um a specific fire inside of you that pushes you constantly. So yeah, curious to just like see what your thoughts are on that.
I have this discussion a lot with my students, right? Because uh, we are talking often about managers and leadership, etc. And if you ask the students, everybody wants to become a manager and a leader, right? But then I say not everybody can become a leader and a manager, because then nobody would do the work, right? So it's also a little bit. I think it's important to understand what are your talents. And going back to your question, I think it's hard. I think that it's like 30% nature. You have to have something in you, I guess. There has to be some kind of this drive, like you say. Also, a little bit of risk affinity, right? Not running away from confrontations, not running away from opportunities, also venturing into the unknown, right? I will soon quote also Star Trek, I think, in this little talk that we have together. But and 70% really the surrounding, which gives you the opportunity, right? Because I think that there are many entrepreneurs out there, but they don't have the means, nor the opportunity, and this is why I really like this field of education, inspiring people and enabling people to think outside of the box. I think this is totally important. And that's why I'm really thinking that education is making the world a better place, actually.
That's actually a great transition into you know, my next question that I have, which is, you're currently teaching digital entrepreneurship at Gizmo University of Applied Sciences. You've been an entrepreneur as well as an, you know, academic. So, in your experience, how does academia both contribute and potentially challenge the journey of an entrepreneur? And maybe just to add some context in there as well, there are a lot of advocates that say, and a lot of very influential, you know, people as well that say, um, the traditional education is not really teaching you to become an entrepreneur. So curious, you know, curious to see what your thoughts are on that.
I would totally underwrite it, right? So traditional education is not getting you to an entrepreneurial stage. I believe also that universities, and this is, I think, also the major job of teachers and tutors at universities, it's for sure at the one side getting you the methodological knowledge, all the facts and figures, etc., right? But I think the major contribution is twofold. The one thing is that you should learn to work in teams, right? Work with your own discipline, work on yourself. Um, and on the other side, when you ask about academia, I think it's really important to say also that it's the academia teaches you self-reflection and self-criticism. And I think this is totally important for entrepreneurs, because you see often that entrepreneurs are like high flyers, and they are so, they are basically leapfrogging from saying, oh, I'm just starting off this small business, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, they are the rulers of the world. And this is, you I think you should stay humble, and you should stay really grounded. um, and if I may add another story here, when I went to New York and also San Francisco to raise money for my publishing house, we had a lot of talks. We even went to the Trump Tower, right? And had talks there with investors, not with Donald Trump, right? But with other guys, not belonging to Donald Trump actually. But what was really interesting was that many investors said, we won't invest into you out of principle. And I asked them, okay, fair enough, right? But what is the principle? Why don't you invest? And they said, yeah, I they liked the business model. They saw the publishing house growing, the advertising model, the business model was good, right? The numbers were good, also the future perspective. But they did not invest because I, as the founder and CEO, I have never failed, right? So many investors, especially in the US, don't invest into greenhorns who are just rising sharp up because they say, okay, you only learn through falling and getting up again. And I think this is something totally important, that you have to see also that not everything is flowers and butterflies all the time, right? But you have to also get back when you fall, something that we learn as children also. And this is a little bit reflected in academia when you say, okay, critical self reflection at the end of the thesis or at the end of the paper. And this is something that students honestly struggle all the time with, because I tell them, hey, you have to find some shortcomings in your own work, right? And they say, why should I do that? My paper's perfect. And I say, no, your paper's not perfect. You should reflect on it and see what could be done better, right? And only through this you learn also.
And so when do you like how do you then basically develop the ability to be okay with what you've produced? Because you could basically do that process forever, right? And then you could create analysis paralysis, which you would never be satisfied with like what you're doing. So how would I be able to basically get out of that and be like, okay, now I, have done everything. I was like, I did all the self reflection. I, edited multiple times. How do I develop that ability to be like, okay, this is good enough. Let me move on.
Now, actually, we are at the part of this discussion where I really wanted to be with you, because now it's getting philosophical. um, eh, no matter if it's your business or if it's a master's thesis or bachelor thesis, basically you can always find things to improve. But you have to make a point at some point, right? You have to say, okay, these are the resources I have at hand, and I'm now satisfied with the result. How do you know that? I think with academia, it's quite easy, because you have limited resources in terms of money or in terms of time, right? With the business on the other side, it's not so easy, but the market tells you. If the market tells you and you have a positive return from there and you make profit in your business, then you should not lean back, but you can say, okay, it's working, at least for the time as it is now, right? As for the time being. And then you can innovate, but you don't have to struggle all the time because you have found your niche. And there we're coming to the other question, which I don't want to take away from you, but actually many large companies are struggling with exactly what you just said. They are saturated, and they are just sitting still, and other companies, other startups are much faster moving and are taking their market share away, while the big long-term players on the market are just thinking, okay, we don't have to change, we don't have to innovate because everything is working, right? So there's a saying in German, wer rastet, der rostet. Wonderful German, right? So if you sit still, then you get lazy. There is something about that, but you should also not hustle and hurry all the time so that you get a heart attack. So at some point you have to find a balance, and I think an indicator is for sure the market response and the market feedback. If you find your niche in the market.
So you mentioned a word that I personally struggle with everything I do, which is balance. So I'm curious what you think about balance and what role it plays within one's own entrepreneurial journey. especially within the beginning stages of, for example, starting a company? Is there something is there balance if you start a company, or do you just have to like accept that just gonna put a lot of other areas of your life on pause, and you have to be focused on this one venture that might require and take out all of your energy?
You mean something like in terms of work-life balance, etc.
Right, right.
The the hyped word, yes. A couple of years ago, by the way, I think 80% of all the theses that I supervised had to do something with a work-life balance. It was really crazy because everybody was interested in that. Um, I'm at the moment in the process of um, starting starting another company in the fintech industry right now with a partner, and my partner is actually significantly younger than me, right? And I see that in terms of balance and in terms of how much energy you devote, it has um, a lot of input factors like how much experience you also have, and what are your priorities and how do you manage your resources. I think it's important that you have a focus in the beginning of an entrepreneurial journey. Focus is totally important. So you have to have a plan, and you have to look what are your goals, right? What are your milestones? This is totally important. But I think often this is a little bit confused with what you say, I have to work day and night. I think at some point, working day and night is not efficient anymore, not only health wise, but also work output wise, not really, right? Um, so you have to really make also a plan for your own resources. Look at when do you take time off, etc. I think this you benefit in the long term, but it gets easier when you are a little bit older, right? When you have the first gray hair. So I think that's the thing.
So I listen.
Because sorry to interrupt you one more, but I think this has also something to do with patience and impatience. Because also when I was younger, right, and especially when I started off Media XP, it was like everything has to be right now. And I believe that if I push enough, it will be right now. And no matter who tells you, you have to feel it yourself that this is not working like that. Because for some things, you just have to wait. Be it the funding of the company, be it talks with investors, I don't know, something like that, right? Or setting up a website, or also your employees, right? You cannot push your employees like you push yourself. It's not working like that. Although you want them to burn for your own company like you do, right? But you have to show patience, and patience is something that I personally think you only develop by doing and by experiencing it. What happens if you don't have patience?
Okay. So basically, you have to be inside the arena, experience it, get skin in the game, and then you get better over time. It's like going to the gym and getting stronger over time. It's like where that balance is basically something you can train yourself getting better on. But you have to be inside the arena, right?
I would say, because no matter, it's like this phenomenon. You hear three people saying, "Okay, you need to have a work-life balance; it's really important." But inside of you, you have a little tiny dwarf sitting, and he tells you, "Hey, but maybe you don't need it. You will be the one and only who does it much better than everybody else, right?" And so you have to feel it yourself that at some point you overstretch it a little bit, right? Maybe, I don't know, you feel totally exhausted on a weekend and you think, okay, I really have to do it differently. Maybe even your relationship goes down the drain, right? Which I don't hope that is happening, right? For nobody. Or you are suffering a burnout, or you feel depressed because you feel overwhelmed, right? But this is something nobody can really tell you exactly the same thing that like nobody can tell you what happens when you run the first time a 10-kilometer run, right? Nobody knows that until you do it.
Right, right. Until you basically, push the boundaries of what you haven't experienced yet, and then you see how your body reacts to that.
Yes.
Okay.
And on the other side, I think it's really important what you just said. I think an entrepreneur, I think in 95% of the time, right, an entrepreneur who is going mm, roads which have not been taken by many before has this fire inside of her or him saying, okay, I want to put all my heart into this project, right? So this is totally normal that you want to really dedicate your time and your life into that. And if you don't feel that, then I would personally also ask myself if this is the right venture to put my time into.
So in terms of risk tolerance, um, how can some just become more risk tolerance and build that? Like, if someone wants to start, for example, but is very afraid of failing, is afraid of starting out the journey and making the first step, um, h- what are certain tools or frameworks that one can use to basically accept uncertainty, become just better with dealing with uncertainty? um, Maybe you have some good advice there.
I think this is actually now we are getting to this point where nature comes in a bit, right? Because nobody wants to be rejected, nobody wants to be pushed away, right? But there are some people who say, okay, I just try it again. I know personally some salespeople, because you were also talking before about sales, right? They have this risk tolerance so much so much maxed out that they don't give anything, right, about being pushed back, because 2 days later they call the guy again and ask again for a meeting, right? This could be a little bit annoying at some point, right? um, there has to be a natural balance, and I think this has a lot to do with self-confidence. And for sure self-confidence you can train, and especially this is, I think, also a thing why if you have a hurdle in risk affinity, it can help you to team up with the right people, teaming up with others who can, balance out your weaknesses and maybe also push your strengths a little bit further. This helps. A solo one man show or one woman show is really hard, because then you are on this roller coaster all yourself. I would not I would not recommend that.
How can someone find a business partner out there? How Like, for example, if I would want to find a business partner, I have an idea. What are the things I can do you know to basically get closer to find someone that I can start something with?
Easy question is to find somebody. The more difficult question is to find somebody you can really trust and you can build something with, right? Because I've heard also this story a lot of times that it was easy to, find somebody, connect with somebody, but then in the nitty gritty details of setting up the company, etc., then it's getting a little bit nasty. So, how to find somebody? I would say, in which field you want to fund your company, you want to start, right? You go to meetups, you go to networking events, you go to fair trade shows, you talk to people, and you also pitch your idea. And here we are coming into this sphere where many will say, oh, I cannot disclose my idea because my idea is so wonderful, it will be stolen immediately, right? Sorry, but this is bullshit, right? I would not, if you have really the magic sauce, I would not disclose the magic sauce, right? But everything around it, like 80%, you can disclose. Um, because an idea is something, but execution is everything. So there are many, many billionaires around the world because they had great ideas, but only a few are real billionaires because they did it, right? Um, so execution is king, and while you talk with people, it's only talking. It's nothing else. So you can find a lot of people where just sharing your ideas, listening to people. I think this is, by the way, this is something that we left out before. I think this is also something which you can learn and which is a really fundamental skill for successful entrepreneurs to listen carefully. And this is something that is really underrated nowadays because also the attention span is so minimal, right? It's like TikTok and reels, etc. 15 seconds attention span is already a lot. But to listen to people and to understand what somebody else wants helps you fundamentally in setting up your business. So if you listen to people, if you can tell the story to people, then you find the people you can click with. And then there's a high probability that you can have good business partners around you. Um, but you have to still look if the chemistry clicks and if you really think that this is a long-term venture you can do together. Because I've also seen often that um, there people are just teaming up because the skills are good skills. So skills that are complementary to each other are wonderful, but on the other side also the chemistry has to be good so that you can really say, okay, no matter how bad or how good the times are, we are in this together. I often say if you are starting a company together, it's like a marriage, because company sometimes it's going longer than a marriage, and you are also working closely together like with a partner, and you also spend a lot of time together, right? So think who you marry.
No, that is absolutely true and very, very important. I think that no one wants to make the wrong decision there. Um, so in terms of if there's someone out there that is contemplating, let's say, whether or not to get into, let's say, a master's degree, right? Or jumping straight into, let's say, the workforce or entrepreneurship, what would you tell that person?
It's a little bit a broad question, right? So the question is always
Whatever answer you come up with, I'll take it.
no, the thing is, um, first of all, it's important, do you know what you want to do later on, right? Are you burning for a specific topic? Are you burning for a specific job, a role, or something? Are you maybe burning for a specific company even? That makes it easier.
How do I know that? So my issue with that is I don't know if I'm burning for it or not. I think I do. Well, I think I do, but so here's my issue with here's my issue with very similar concept also with passion, right? We always hear, oh, you have to have a lot of passion, and otherwise you will not move on. So but ultimately I have a hypothesis. I think I want to do this, right? Then I'm entering it, and then I actually know if it's the thing that I want to do or not, right? So what if I burn for it, but then that fire, because I see it's super difficult, right? I make the first steps towards it, and then that fire slowly turns into fear, turns into, I don't know if this is the right thing, and then I, question everything, and then so, so I guess my question here is, how do I keep that fire up and running? Because in the beginning, motivation is not the problem, right? We all know that nowadays entrepreneur ship is become like has become cool. We all have seen what Elon Musk basically did to entrepreneurship, which is he you know he popu he made it very popular, and so everyone wants to become an entrepreneur, but almost feel like for the wrong reasons. A lot of the times it's, yeah, I want to live this very, very exclusive life, and have all the money, all the financial resources, yada yada. So the motivation in the beginning is not the problem, right? It's like we're all super motivated, but then once we start that journey and I have encountered that myself multiple times or experienced that myself. I start then questioning what I do, and then I don't know if it's the right thing. I question my idea. And then I stop pursuing it because there is something else out there that one of a sudden catches my attention, and then I jump towards that. So how like what are ways to deal with that? Is it just blindly trusting in like that thing that you started out to, build, or is it just part of the journey that there will be a lot of distraction, there will be a lot of, like, you will face your own mind basically, as well, so, and that's just part of the entrepreneurial journey.
That's a big question, right? That's okay. So we talk for 2 or 3 hours now about that. No, uh, actually, mm, I think it has also something to do with self development, because the more you try out, the more you will understand your own drivers, right? Some people are driven by money. Some people are driven by fame. Some people are driven by gratitude from others and appreciation, right? And others are just saying, okay, they want to contribute, but they don't want to be in the spotlight. They just want to do research, for example, right, on themselves, and they want to publish and get cited by others, but they don't want to meet people. It's all good, right? So people are really different, and I think there's no formula also how an entrepreneur should be or can be successful in that regard. I think completely agree with you saying that many people get inspired by Elon Musk and others, also by Jack Ma and Jeff Bezos, etc. But misunderstanding that all of them are completely, first of all, different characters, also really extroverts, right? Okay, Jack Ma is now a little bit off the screen, but basically all of them are basically in the spotlight, right? But there are also hidden champions. Also in Germany, for example, there are companies, for example, the founders of Aldi, of the discounter, right? They were never in the newspapers, right? They are two brothers. They are multi-billionaires, right? And successful entrepreneurs by all means, right? But nobody, if they are going without security, without bodyguards on the street, right? They are driving their own cars to the supermarket, right? So it's completely the silent life, right? So, um, and sometimes because you said, okay, you get distracted, this is also part of the journey. This is also why I tell my students, come on, try stuff out as long as you don't have responsibilities, as long as you don't have a family, as long as you don't have kids. Try things out, because sometimes it's more important to know what you don't want than to know what you want.
When do you know what you don't want? Well, like, is it a question that you have to ask yourself in terms of, did I give it my all, and I now realize, okay, I, tried everything, but it didn't really lead me to what I initially thought it'll lead me to? Or is it like, I kind of find it difficult to know when to give up and when to understand, okay, this might not be it, because I always ask myself the question of, did you really give your all? Did you really work 60, 70 hours a week? Did you really try to make this happen, and put all of your energy into that? And if the answer is no, then how do I know that, okay, this might not be for me? I should probably be the number two or number three, join a company, right? Be the VP or be the manager, rather than going out there and being an entrepreneur. Or is that self-reflection again, where kind of you have to monitor yourself?
Yes, it is self-reflection. On the other side, it can also be that you work as a VP, right? Or as a line manager or something, right? And then after that, you have so much experience and you know what you want, and then you become an entrepreneur. I don't think that this is totally needed to jump directly into the entrepreneurship by the age of 20 or 25, right? Um, it's also something when this I also wanted to say about what you have to want to study, master or work, etc. uh, it does not matter what you study, in my opinion, because often you are studying, for example, law, and then you end up in business, right? Or you study entrepreneurship, and then you end up in supply chain because there is an opportunity and you find there you can make an impact. um, there is something called gut feeling, and this is something that often in our data driven society and also data driven economy often is overshadowed by analysis and quantification. But I think the gut feeling is really important. Do you think that you did enough to feel confident and to feel satisfied with your day, right? So it helps also at the end of the day to say, okay, what are the three things on this day that I accomplished and where I can be proud of myself? And what are the three things that could have been better, right? And then you have a gut feeling, an overall feeling. Was it a good day or not a good day? And if you have something like this, like a diary, then you have an overview of how good or how satisfied you can be with your work life, and maybe also with your private life and with the other aspects. And I think this helps also a little bit in the self-reflection. um, I think it's just important that not to, there are people that are really over focusing on negative stuff. That you should not do, because this is the part of the overthinking. If I'm always thinking, okay, what could have been better, and I focus too much on that, then I completely ignore the good things. I'm a strong believer in really celebrating small victories also, not only with the team, right, but also with yourself, right? You had a good call, you had a good interview, you made now an appointment for next week for a client where you have been after that for 2 months, right? Just say, hey, this was good stuff, right? And this is a mindset that you're building up, and out of this mindset you can grow yourself a positive attitude, and this positive attitude gives yourself again energy.
That is that's a very difficult thing for me, at least, because every time I have these small wins or experience them, it's really difficult for me to basically take a step back and celebrate them because I'm already moving on mentally to the next thing. And I personally haven't found it yet to be a negative thing. Um, but everyone around me obviously wants to celebrate, and then they they always then tell me, hey, like, why can we not celebrate, or why are you not taking a day off, or but my mindset is already running and running, and it's like, okay, this was a small victory, but this is nothing compared to where I want to go. So I always view it in that way.
But Mr. Niemand, you see what you say yourself, right? It's impatience, because basically you are living in the future while you should live in a now, because we always only live now. You have not, sorry, I don't want to be now completely, morbid or negative, but we all have no idea if we live tomorrow, right? I could go today to bed, have a brain stroke, bye bye, right? So I have no security about what will be tomorrow. And so I can make a lot of plans, but actually I have to enjoy the moment. And this is, I would say, 20, 15 years ago, I also did not have this attitude. Not at all, right? Because you always think, okay, what will be tomorrow? Okay, today, check mark, what is tomorrow, right? But I think it gives you a lot of inner peace to say, um, well, enjoy also a little bit the moment. This does not mean that you're not pushing, right? But still, you have to find this peace, and also to say, okay, what have I accomplished, and where can I? What are the next steps that I can take from here? But still know these are my victories, and I think this it also helps with when you set milestones in your journey, right? What are milestones for you? You told me in the beginning what you are working at the moment on, what you want to accomplish, right? But when you have achieved that, I would also say, okay, celebrate that and then think only further. Don't think till the end already. because there are many different ways to go to Rome. There's also this saying. So there's not only one straight way. Actually, sorry for side pathing here quickly, but when doing job interviews, right, I find it much more important to have job interviews with people who have a non-linear um, CV than somebody who had everything planned out. Because this is, sorry, but this is a little bit boring, right? It's foreseeable. It's more interesting to have somebody who can tell a little bit about adventures, about being sidetracked, about having spent there a time and then it was unplanned and I was getting into this thing and then into this. It shows interest and it shows a life that is full of experience and full of curiosity. And me personally, I find this more interesting than somebody who said, okay, I made a bachelor, master, and then I made this, and this for 15 years.
Yeah, I have to work on that for sure. Living in the present moment. Even though I really enjoy working, and for me, work is fun. A lot of people don't understand that.
Can I get here into 1 second? Sorry. Never invite a professor to a podcast. It's a really, really bad idea. But so what you just said, I think it's really, really important, this lifelong learning aspect, right? We all learn every day and be open for learning. That is really, really important. And if you say, and this was the one aspect, lifelong learning, never be really satisfied, be curious. I think that the life is much too short to work something that you don't like. No matter if you are working at the post office, as an entrepreneur, or as a sales agent, it does not matter. You should find something where you think you make an impact and which is enriching for you, because you're working basically, I don't know, even if you're part-time working, you are working 6 to 8 hours a day, right? This is a lot. This is a third of your life, right? A third of your week. um, and so this is also an indication, because you asked before, how do you know if the entrepreneurship is something for you or if you're on the right track? If you don't like what you do and if you don't get up in the morning and say, hey, I want to do this because I'm motivated, I feel refreshed, and I feel that this is something where I also have fun and excitement when I do that, then I would stop it. For sure, there are sometimes crises, and there's the entrepreneurial roller coaster, and sometimes everything is going to shit, etc. Yes, but in the long term, you should get up and say, okay, this is something that I want to do.
I'm gonna ask you now a question that is a complete 360, basically. What do you think about morning routines, and what is your morning routine? How does that look like? Because there is this new trend out there that morning routines are, you know, basically doing 2 hours of morning work to then actually prepare yourself to do the actual work.
So I think it depends a lot if you're a morning person or not, right? I think you're referring to Jeff Bezos, etc., doing the 5 o'clock, going into the office and then doing the morning meetings and then going with the dog out, etc.
Cold showers and
So I have to say that I'm not really a morning person, right? I'm more an evening and late night worker. But my morning routine is actually jogging, running, if I have the time, because I think this is something that I discovered for me is really nice to just refresh my mind. And I'm also running in the winter, right, on snow, etc., because it's just super refreshing, and it's some time off from the screen, because I think nowadays we are too much on the screen and too little with real people, or also by ourselves sometimes. um, yeah, this would be my morning routine, but it actually depends, I think, where you have the feeling that it really benefits you and your lifestyle. I would not say that it should be a punishment, because especially the people who are then going under the cold shower just because Jeff Bezos is doing that or something like that, right? Yeah, it's a little bit, yeah, a little bit insane, I would say, because yeah, why I have to find my own way. This is also something, right? many people, many students that I talk to, I want to be like Elon Musk. Guess what? You will never be like Elon Musk, right? Because there's only one Elon Musk. Find your own way.
Yeah, that is super interesting. And I caught myself doing that constantly, right? To basically mimic other people and to try to be more like them. Um, which I guess is not a bad thing per se, right? Because if you model your life um based on someone that is already there, or has gone through like a path or journey, or has taken on a journey that is one that you would like to take on as well, um modeling your life based on that person is per se not a bad thing. I feel like, but when you completely ignore your own unique individual aspects that you have, then I think then I think that you can easily just look outside and try to like do everything that they do and don't really question if it works for you or not, because you're focused on the outside world rather than asking yourself the question, hey, is this actually working for me or not?
This brings me back to the question that you posed in the beginning, right? So, um, it, I think it's totally important to have an open mind. And if I ask myself all the time, what would Jeff do, right? Then basically, I always put myself into the shoes of Jeff Bezos and I ignore a lot of things that are happening around me. And I would say I'm not going into the religious discussion here right now, right? But there is this famous T-shirt, but what would Jesus do, right? I think this is something different because there it was about loving your next one, etc., right, and so on. But in terms of imitating famous people, I think also in the beauty industry, there are a lot of women for sure. I have no study about that, right? But a lot of women back in the days wanted to imitate Pamela Anderson, for example. For sure, because these are celebrities. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of fame. They have also a lot of problems, but we ignore the problems, right? Because it's easier for us to just see the positive things out of that. Because the divorce of Jeff Bezos was for sure also not fun for him, right? The problems that Elon Musk have with the different mothers and I don't know how many children, I think over 10 children now, also not so. I don't know if this is always fun for him. I don't think so. Um, but people tend to ignore that and tend to focus only on one aspect, which also narrows it down. But as we have also talked in one of our previous talks, I strongly believe that the evolution of human beings is not a long one right now because we are still in the stone age with our brain at least. And so we tend to have only white and black, right? Black and white. So if we say Elon Musk is our idol, it's easy to ignore everything else because he is the mastermind, right? Um, and also many politicians are using that for populist actions and say, oh, the Turkish guys are coming and they're invading our country and they are taking away our women, etc. Vote now, right? Complete bullshit, right? But it works because the mind and the brain of us is still in the Stone Age. And here we have a lot of divergence between our options that we have on this planet and about the information that we get through different channels, internet, computer, AI, and on the other side, the capacity of our brain, because the brain cannot evolve that quickly. And so this is another challenge layer that we have to face as human beings nowadays and as a society as a whole, I would say.
Do you think it was easier to be an entrepreneur 20 years ago versus now?
I think it was different. I think it's always about a matter of perspective. If you would now travel back 20 years from our time, right, like a time traveler, I think you would say it is easier back in the days with the knowledge that you have now, actually. But I think back in the days it was not easy because you had more local rivalry. You had not the whole globe as a potential market, and you don't have so many tools, right, of information and also of advertising. at your hand and at your fingertips. So it was different, and especially in terms of, the, I think were a lot of potentials, of market potentials, which were untapped. Nowadays, a lot of markets are saturated already, but on the other side, people were not so risk affine also in terms of investments. Um, so I think it was just different, and maybe back in the days, you had it harder to become successful without any family ties or any connections. This has fundamentally changed, you have to say, also through the IT age and the information technology age, or basically the whole technology that we have at our disposal, that everybody with a laptop can become a freelancer, can become an entrepreneur, and can earn their own money, right? So the entry barriers are much lower than back in the days, because back in the days, you had the different social classes, and if you're not in a class where you have access to money and you have the connections, then you're basically bound to have a poor life, which is not the case anymore.
Interesting. Um, I wanted to talk about hackathons. Um, just for the next couple of minutes. I saw that you're involved in a lot of student-led hackathons. So, can you describe what what hackathons are, and basically also give a little bit of context in terms of what the objective goal is?
That was quite a stretch now, right? From the
We went from a deep topic to actually a section that I really want to know more about. I've heard a lot about hackathons, but I never really, had someone to actually talk about that. So really glad that you're involved in that.
So I already told you that I really love this transfer of knowledge, right? This is basically my driver why I became an academic and a professor, that I want to transfer knowledge from the practical field to the academic field, and also make the sciences more applied, right? So that everybody can also relate to them and can say, okay, it inspires me, it enables me to have a better life and to start my own career. And I'm quite lucky that at GISMA we have a strong belief in this interconnection between practice and academia, so that we have a lot of corporate partners who we are really strongly cooperating with, and also inviting for such events like the Skill Sprint Week, or hackathons as well, right? So the Skill Sprint Week is one week within a quarter, because we at GISMA, we have quarters and we don't have semesters, so we have 4 quarters a year. And every quarter we make a Skill Sprint Week, which is full of corporate events. That could be webinars, that could be excursions, hackathons, case studies, etc. And these hackathons actually are one uh, of the most beloved events by our students, because the the companies, like we had Daimler Benz the the other day, they are coming with a practical problem for the students. For example, a data set, and the students should then analyze the data set and come up with solutions in a specific time frame. So for example, they had this data set of one of their machines and one of their processes, and their students had to had to analyze the data. This was, I think, a data set of 10,000 lines in Excel, and I think 150 columns, right? And so they had to analyze that, break it down, and find flaws in the process and optimization potential. And after 8 hours of working, the management of Daimler was there to look um, at the results, um, and basically listen to what the students could come up with, this real world example, because also in the real world you have a specific time frame and your management wants to have results, right? And this is for sure for the companies highly interesting because they can identify potential future employees, and for the students, it's the practical test if everything that they are learning really matters in the real world or not.
And I guess every year the topic um, kind of changes, right? I mean, you were mentioned that. So what about those hackathons where students, basically have an 8 hour window, or sometimes is it always 8 hours, or can it also be 16? Or
No, it can be also 2 days, for example, right? It can be also, there are different formats.
okay, okay, that's set by the university basically.
Yes. So the last time we had a 2 day event, also some students stayed overnight at the university. They slept actually there, right? So they said, okay, they have so much work to do. They want to do it so perfectly. Coming back to this hustling, what we have discussed before. So they just slept
Work
on the
life balance, right?
exactly. They just slept in on the floor of the lecture rooms actually, yeah, which is for sure something that we don't encourage, but which can happen in these situations.
And then what's what's the goal? What's the outcome of that? Is there like for example the Daimler hackathon, was it that Daimler then basically that they were able to get into Daimler, as did they get an internship out of this, or is it like
So actually, we'll have next week final presentations with the IT management of Daimler, right? Another round basically, and they will award the best team or the best individuals with internships there, yeah, which is a nice thing. There are also uh, other combinations where you, for example, get certificates, right, or also some vouchers, etc. So there are different configurations of these events that you can think of.
have you come across any projects that like led to like the actual creation of a company, for example?
Now, for example, for out of the hackathons, you mean, or generally?
Hmm. Like maybe there was an idea within the hackathon that like a team won, and then they continued working on that, and then they were able to actually build a company around that first initial MVP or whatever it was that they were building during the hackathon.
So the hacker in not in the hackathon, because the hackathon is often, most of the time sponsored by a company, so they don't want the team to spin off, right? They want to integrate them into the company, right? More or less as a separate department or as employees. So this happened, right? On the other side, we have also a student initiative, a student club called Entrepreneur at GISMA, and here we see a steady outcome of spin-offs. So, for example, also a food delivery service has been funded from there, and different other startups that the students are then also funding by themselves. Also with the help of the faculty, for example, which is really great.
How is the Berlin entrepreneur scene, and what do you think is the difference between um, American entrepreneurs versus European entrepreneurs?
So I would say Berlin is a strange mix. Um, in terms of entrepreneurial culture and entrepreneurial scene, because it's on the one hand side it's overheated, right? You have really every day some events and startup meetings, etc., where basically after some time you meet always the same people, right? Okay, this can also happen in the US, but here it's really extreme. uh, I always make the jokes with my students. Basically, you don't have to buy any food, you can just go to events every day, right? Because you can eat once you're in this circle, you eat every day at some events, um, and there are a lot of fakers, right, in this Berlin scene, because the hype and also the venture capital in Berlin is really high. It was now a little bit less in the because of Corona, but there are a lot of people that are just fake it until they make it, or they hope they make it, right? Um, a lot of blah blah, right? So this is really annoying. On the other side, I would say that it's a good first step to get into the pool, to go to some events there. Uh, but a student once asked me, okay, how do I know if I can trust the people there? Actually, you don't know, right? Because everybody is like the biggest rock star that you meet, and like in normal life, also when you meet somebody on, maybe not on Tinder, but on Parship, let's say, right? You also have to build the trust, like in a relationship, right? Um, and what is the biggest difference? I would say that there are two main differences. The US entrepreneurs are more vision driven and not so much traction driven like the European entrepreneurs, because of the investor attitude. In the US, still the vision is more important than the traction, which means that you don't have to show KPIs and you don't have to show profit, etc. In Europe, and especially in Germany, basically, if you don't have profit within the first year or year and a half of operation, you don't get money, right? Because you have to show a business model, and the business model has to be solid, and uh, it has to generate money from the beginning in some way. Yeah. Sorry, and the second aspect is that from a mindset, I think that the US entrepreneurs are more also coming from the society and from the culture background. They are not so afraid to fail, actually, like the European entrepreneurs, which is for sure also not always good, right? Especially in terms of taking care, hire and fire policy, etc. But in terms of innovation, it's sometimes important that you also try out new stuff. Although I have to say that I'm not the biggest fan of always saying, and this is something that I wanted to discuss today as well, right? That capitalism is a wonderful thing, basically, because it gathers the wealth that we have at the moment. But I think it's time to really discuss if it has to be always bigger, better, and more, because at some point it cannot be bigger, better, and more anymore. So innovation, I think it's important to fuel our wealth and to fuel our society for a better future, but not maybe all the time in earning more money and having more on the plate and growing bigger and bigger, because at some point we also have to watch our resources.
Isn't that not also like why all these new startups that are coming out that are value driven rather than financial driven or financially driven, that they, hit the scene and then they like surpass all these super old companies that have been existed for decades. I mean, Tesla is a great example. I mean, it's worth more than I think the 10 car companies, the 10 most uh like oldest car companies combined. And to your point, they were value driven. They had a mission. They actually wanted to create change. Obviously the financial incentives are always there, otherwise no one would start a company. But really having that level of impact, I think is a great way to create that intrinsic motivation to actually keep going. Um, but it really requires also, I mean, there's nothing wrong, I think, with starting a company because you want to make money. I think it's, but I don't think it's the best way to do that. I don't think it's the best way to so, because there might be easier ways to actually make money. um join a company. And so I think really the challenge is really trying to understand the why behind like behind your action, basically. And there's a great book. Um, it's called Start with Why, from Simon Sinek, and he basically lays out all those big companies, and the why is so strong, that they were able to, reach those heights basically. um, and so yeah, so the why I think is really important.
Yeah, and also like we discussed before, the money is important for sure, also as a motivator, but at some point, money is not everything, right? So if you just start a company because of the money, you won't be happy.
In terms of business plan, is that something? So I really try to understand if it's necessary in the beginning or not. So from where I'm coming from is I read a lot of books about the early 2000s and all these companies that were built um, during that time frame. And a lot of those, they started out, they had an idea, and they were like, hey, let's try to build an MVP around this idea, and then they took it basically step by step, right? They didn't have it like laid out business plan in the beginning, where they had laid out the milestones and all the objectives and the mission statement, and then basically had like, okay, if we hit X, Y, and Z users, we want to do that within the first years. So I guess my point is, or I guess my question here is that really needed these days, or is it more important to, if you really have an idea, which I guess is like technology will be a huge part of that idea, um, is it more important to find a way to build that MVP, get users using your product, right? And then basically go from there.
Always the question for whom you do the business plan, right? So some investors want a business plan. Um, I would say that a business plan is mainly a tool for self reflection again, because the business plan won't be up to date 2 days after you finished it. Won't be, because especially in the beginning, everything around you and also yourself as a startup is changing so quickly. And so, yes, I totally agree. The MVP is more important than a business plan, but still, this reflection at the time that you take to draw the business plan and to also think through the different scenarios, this is the real exercise that you have to go through, not the writing and not the layout of the business plan, etc. Right? You can also do the business plan basically in the lean startup canvas, etc., and just chop it down and discuss it with your partners. This is also completely fine. Right? It does not have to be 50 pages of a Word document or something like that. But I think it's important to make this exercise to self-reflect and to be ready for different scenarios, because this is automatically coming up, because you say, okay, who are my competitors, what could happen in the future, how can we adapt if this is happening, and this makes you more robust and more resilient if you are going into that pathways, right, and more self-confident also with your offering.
So a business plan forces me to think it through. It forces me to make sure I really I answer so I ask myself those uncomfortable questions that force me to maybe sit there on a blank page and for the first 5 hours, and because there's like so much going on, and it forces me also um to structure my thoughts, to clear them out, filter them out, right? Interesting. Okay, yeah.
And also to reflect, where could I have blank spots, right? So, for example, I know that I need technology, but half of the questions in my technology part of the business plan I cannot answer because I'm not the technology guy, right? Brings me up to the point that I need somebody for technology on my team, because other than that, if I always buy this from somebody external, might not be the best thing because I get too dependent on somebody externally.
And when would you say it would make sense to create that business plan? Is it business plan from the beginning? Like try to, like, if you have an idea, for example, try to write. the business plan, or is it try to build the product if you have the like the tech, know-how, and you were able to build the product? Would it make more sense to build the product in the beginning, try to get it into the hands of the users to kind of confirm proof of concept and to see if there is product market fit, and then take the next step?
I think I will now confront you with a statement of mine which drives my students crazy. Um, because the thing that should come in the beginning is really something like the core cycle, like the core process of your business. Not a big business plan in the beginning. I would not do that, right? But something like a short abstract, like a paragraph, like 3 or 4 lines, or even a graphic where you say, okay, how do I generate money? How do I get a new customers? What are my major KPIs, and how do I ensure that this will work in the future? If this is logical and convincing also for other people that you are presenting this to, then you're on a good track. And if it makes also sense to you, and if you still feel motivated on the next day after doing that and after sketching that, if you feel still motivated, then it's great.
Professor, I know it's getting late on your end, so I want to finish this up with one last question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
You have today you dig deep in the good questions, right? Yes, the best piece of advice. Um, I think the best piece of advice was that for some things that you really believe in, you need to have a long breath, right? Sometimes um, the road is not easy, because if it would be easy, many people would do it. That is a learning that is really fundamental, I would say. Um, Many people give up too easily, and that does not mean that you should hold on to a dead horse, right? That is also the other thing. But um, many people fear the challenge, especially nowadays. I see this in upcoming generations, because everything is on your fingertip, and this is a core competency as an entrepreneur, that you have to have this strive for challenge, and you have to like to be competitive. And if you have this, you should also develop this long breath, that you say, okay, um, it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. Right? I would say this is one of the most important learnings that comes also with life. You can be lucky, right? And you can also push your luck a lot in terms of trying to be disruptive and making the quick dollar, but happens not often, right? And is most of the time also not sustainable, I have to say.
Thank you, Professor. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.